all of this is actually bringing in a lot of customer convenience.
In every use case, any payment situation, now we have an electronic alternative of the cash, and this is a good news for everyone.
Instant payment provide a lot of value for European players, since it's a new scheme that can work under the same rules for all Europeans.
At any given moment, there are billions and billions of euros kind of trapped in the pipelines of the financial system. They could be freed up for consumption, for investment, with huge economic benefits.
Instant payment is really able to address all kinds of payment situations, from P2P to bill payment to e-commerce to plain vanilla POS payments. But most interestingly, all these new payment situations where you will scan a code.
SMEs expect from this new instant payments to get better services, more level playing fields compared to other companies.
Instant payments is an incredibly powerful tool. I think we also need to ask ourselves, can we do everything at once? And is every use case to be achieved at the same time?
Good morning. My name is Willem Pieter de Groene, and I want to welcome you to this SEP's ACRI webinar on how to unlock the potential for instant payments. Before we start with the presentations on experiences with instant payments in various countries around the globe, we'll move to SEP CEO Carol Lanoux for some introductory remarks. Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Willem, and good morning. Pleasure to welcome you for this webinar on instant payments. We're very happy we can organize this, and we're also happy to see there's a lot of interest. We had more than 200 registered participants. But let me first say briefly, what is instant payments about? It's about electronic retail payments that are processed in real time, 24 hours a day, the full year on, where the funds are made available immediately for use by the recipient. I mean, it deals with real-time electronic payments, and they are extremely important for a pan-European integrated payment system, both online for e-commerce and for point-of-sale payment. So we see it grow certainly over the last 2 years with COVID, when e-commerce has grown a lot, but we had it already well before for example, these point-of-sale payments. But what is the issue now, and what is the Commission addressing, but also what is the ECB addressing? We have national solutions, but they do not necessarily function in a EU context. So we need to have something which we know well in financial markets overall, in payments, but also, for example, for securities markets. We need to have interoperability. We need to have cross-border availability. We need to have solutions that work at a pan-European level and that are mutually interoperable. So that requires investments in infrastructure and connectivity, as one of the persons in the introductions was saying. We need to have this connectivity between these different payment services providers to have an interoperable and overall a pan-European functioning system. But we also need to have, at the same time, consumer protection. We need to make sure that the way in which a consumer, when doing a payment, is protected at the same level in his member states, is at the same level as at a European level, and that there is a trust by citizens in the solution which we have. So have, on the one hand, the investments needed to have a connectivity, a pan-European solution, but consumers need to trust what is there. And the figures which were also mentioned in the introduction, it accounts for about 7% of credit transfers, I assume, in the Eurozone or in the EU as a whole. So what we'll try to do in the seminar of these two different sessions, we will discuss the challenges with policymakers, with authorities, with industry representatives to have an insight on what's going on, how applications function within a national context, and how they're working towards solutions to make them function in a European context. And we do this with the support of a grant from the Central Bank of Hungary, which also has a specific system which works well within a national context, but we're also working to make it function in a European context. So with this, I wish you welcome, and I hope, let's say, we'll have an interesting seminar on behalf of SEPS and on behalf of ECRI. And of course, there will be plenty of time for raising questions with the speakers through the Q&A, but also through other forms in the chat function. So with this, I wish you an interesting seminar, and I hope we can have some very good takeaways from this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. For the first presentation of today, we move to Soumya Patnaik from ACI Worldwide, who will present the value proposition of instant payments based on experience with instant payments around the globe. After Soumya's presentations, we will have most probably time for 1 or 2 questions. So if you would like to ask Soumya a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Soumya, the floor is yours.
Thanks, William. A very good morning, everyone. My name is Soumya Patnaik, and I'm a global solution leader for real-time payments at ACI Worldwide. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about everything real-time payments, the trends that we're seeing globally, and the value proposition that instant payments bring in. For those of you who don't know about ACI, we're a payment software company providing mission-critical real-time payment solutions to banks, financial intermediaries, corporations, billers, etc. Every year, we publish our Prime Time for Real-Time report, which is one of its kind industry report that gives global and market-level insights for real-time payments. We published this in partnership with Global Data. This year's Prime Time report covers insights from 53 countries. And this year's report is unique as well because it includes an economic impact assessment for the very first time across 30 of the 53 countries. And this research has been done by Center for Economics and Business Research. As you can see, I'll be presenting some of the data on the slides today. So as you can see, the move towards real-time payments is unstoppable. 118.3 billion transactions in 2021, with a GDP impact of 78.4 billion across USD across those 30 countries. And the GDP impact is expected to cross 173 billion by 2026, which is massive and equivalent to the output of 10.3 million jobs. Some insights from the report: real-time payments are growing rapidly, as all of us know, and all modern economies need to adopt real-time payments. The instant nature of the real-time payments improves the liquidity in the financial system, which is bringing more economic efficiency and hence is accelerating economic growth. Then I think the most important thing, consumers demand real-time payment experiences. Market has actually moved from how a merchant wants to accept a payment to how a consumer wants to pay for their purchases. And lastly, we can say that industry at a large is growing rapidly, and banks and financial institutions are prioritizing cloud-first initiatives to benefit from a scalable, flexible infrastructure that will keep their overall cost and risk low. On your screen, you can see a comparison between the 3 important real-time payment markets. So if you look at India, who are undoubtedly the global leaders in real-time payments, India contributed about 50% of the global real-time payment volumes in 2021. The 5-year CAGR is 33.35%, and the volumes are expected to cross 200 billion by 2026, as per the report. UK, on the other hand, is an established market. It's a matured market. Faster payments has been live since 2008. So we saw a total of 3.6 billion transactions in 2021, and with a 5-year CAGR of 11%. United States is a unique market because we have 2 real-time payment schemes live already, with one expected to go live next year, which is why we're expecting a CAGR of 37% by 2026. And the current volume was 1.8 billion, which is expected to cross about 9 billion by 2026. Moving on, this is the global real-time payment footprint, where you can see so many countries are already live with immediate payments. All key markets globally have introduced their real-time payment scheme, and several others have planned its launch, and the pandemic is actually fast tracking the launch of some of these schemes. In Europe, we've seen more than 11 countries are now live on the pan-European SET Inst, and we've also seen other domestic schemes like Twint, Bism, we've seen Swish, come up in some of the countries. Next, I want to talk about some of the top real-time payment markets in the world, and basically the key learnings from these markets. So we are seeing emerging nations take a lead for real-time payments versus developed nations. I want to talk about some of the key markets here. First, we'll start with India. Incredible journey. 5 billion transactions per month. But when it was launched back in 2016, only 16 banks participated in the pilot phase. Now, cut to 2022, over 315 banks are live on the UPI platform. 25 fintech players like Google and WhatsApps of the world are participating in the real-time payment ecosystem. In fact, 95% of all real-time payment transactions are initiated on a fintech app in India rather than a bank channel. So what worked for India? I would say several things worked out for India. Even though it was not centrally mandated, government started incentivizing banks, consumers, and even merchants for using real-time payments. The merchant discount rate or the merchant service fee was waived off for merchants since 2018 in order to drive adoption. And I would say that was a major breakthrough, because the success of a real-time payment scheme depends on how well established the merchant ecosystem is. In fact, Indian businesses and consumers benefited from an estimate of about 12.6 billion because of real-time payments in 2021, which is predominantly driven by net savings in the payment system cost. Then I think India also opened doors, like I said, to players like Google, WhatsApp, Amazon, transformed the end user experience, brought in new digital services that led to adoption and growing volume. The volumes are expected to cross 200 billion by 2026, and the GDP impact is going to cross 45 billion by 2026. So incredible story, like I said. Another interesting market from the other side of the globe is Brazil. And it is one of those markets that mandated participation for real-time payment scheme, which was PIX. That was the main reason that Brazil got a flying start. Very few schemes, achieved 1 billion transactions in their first couple of months of launch. And Brazil was actually able to do that because all major banks were mandated to participate in the pilot launch. And there were other initiatives as well, like the government mandated few use cases like their annual tax collections, transit payments using PIX. So more and more consumers started using PIX for these payments, which also drove the adoption and volume. We all know that PIX is a new entrant in Latin America, but it still stands in sharp contrast with its regional peers like Spay in Mexico, which is live since 2004, but the adoption has not been that great. So what worked for Brazil? I would say central mandate, which gave it the much needed start, and innovation and numerous use cases that the scheme brought in terms of QR codes, PIX withdraw, future dated payments, etc. In fact, 90% of all PIX payments are QR code based. So that led to a lot of adoption in Brazil. At a macroeconomic level, the net savings for businesses and consumers that real-time payments brought in last year was 5.7 billion USD, which is massive for a country like Brazil. Moving on, another very interesting market is Malaysia. Malaysia is a large real-time payment market. It's a massive market for ACI as well because we process 100% of the real-time payment volume in the market. Malaysia sort of mandated the real-time payment connectivity. So there was a central mandate for all banks to be ISO 20022 compliant and also be on a unified scheme connector. So the market leveraged, even if the mandate gave the initial push, but the market leveraged heavily on digital overlays and value-added services like QR payments, direct debit, request for pay. So mandating connectivity did solve for the initial adoption, but innovation and use cases made it sustainable for the ecosystem, for the banks and financial institutions in the ecosystem. Malaysia is also part of the Asian Payment Network. So very high levels of cross-border activity with other countries in the region. Malaysia is also participating in Project Nexus that experiments cross-border interoperability between Asia Pacific and Europe. At a macroeconomic level, I would say the net savings for consumers and businesses was mostly around the average payment cost, which was lower for real-time payments as compared to other traditional modes like ACH or bank transfer. So yeah, interesting takeaways from these markets, and you'll find more insights, more detailed insights in the Prime Time report. So this brings us to the question, what is the value proposition of instant payments? So there's definitely a direct link between real-time payments and economic growth. And even after decades of adoption, I would say, there is still ample room for growth. And even after decades of adoption in Europe, the economic benefits of real-time payments, I would say, are largely untapped. Growth is forecasted to be slower in matured markets like Europe and US, where cards has been established for decades now, and the underlying mechanism for newer modes of payment like contactless or mobile wallet payments are all card-based. Europe's 5-year CAGR is 23%. So like I said, there's ample room for growth to benefit from real-time payments. And there is a need for digital-first policies and initiatives in the region. The European Commission's upcoming legislation for mandating immediate payments in the region will change some of these market dynamics for sure, and will change the numbers for sure. And it's imperative for European financial institutions that they can no longer approach real-time payment services as tentative. And we need such digital-first policies in the region to sensitize the need to move to real-time payments. If you look at individual countries, France has a projected net savings for consumers and businesses for about 315 million in 2020 by 2026. We have Germany, which is the largest economy in the European Union. The projected net savings that real-time payments can bring in by 2026 is more than 1.1 billion, which is a massive number. Then secondly, driver of innovation. Real-time payments are undoubtedly the driver of innovation. Successful digital payment markets like India, China, Malaysia, Brazil have proven that, clearly defining the digital use cases will help them solve for the market pain points and bring in innovation in the market. Whether it's the ability to use your social media apps like WhatsApp or Facebook to make a payment, or the ability to scan a QR code and push a payment. So customers today demand for convenience, and real-time payments will help such digital capabilities to be launched in the market, and will help banks and financial institutions create that competitive differentiation. Next important benefit, I would say, is revenue potential. We would agree that the highest revenue potential for real-time payments does not lie in its immediacy, but the customer convenience or the customer experience that it enables. So digital services like request to pay or e-invoicing, for instance, opens up additional revenue channels for the banks and financial institutions. So there is so much innovation, and innovation has subsequent revenue implication as well. So we've also seen banks leverage payment data to offer personalized solutions, for personalized offerings to their end customers, and also cross-sell and upsell other products of theirs. Value-added services, I touched on this earlier. So banks can actually leverage real-time payments to move away from just standard payments and offer new capabilities that would augment their end experience. Banks, because payments can now become more integrated and experiences can be more enriched. And with the growing move to cloud, I think banks and FIs are being able to deliver new capabilities quickly in the market at a very low cost. Last but most important benefit of the ecosystem is cost reduction. I talked about the GDP implication and the net savings that real-time payments bring. And this has been proven in the across markets, and it's quite impressive, the net savings that real-time payments bring in. And real-time payments are actually cost effective. They lower the transaction cost, as the average payment cost is lower as compared to other traditional modes like bank transfer, ACH, etc. And there's also reduced cost with regards to fraud and failed transaction. So it definitely brings the much needed cost efficiency. So as you see, the possibilities are infinite. Real-time payments are here to stay, to help you grow, and growth is something that is highly driven by customer experience and adoption. Like we say, it's undeniably prime time for real time now. And yeah, this brings us to the end of the presentation. I would like to hand back to William.
Thank you, Samia. So you predict basically a very large growth almost across the world for instant payments. You mentioned already a few drivers, but could you maybe delve a bit deeper into the main drivers causing the growth in the years to come?
I think it's proven that digital payments directly impact economic growth. The economies that are most cash intensive tend to grow at a slower pace as compared to those who are moving to cashless payments or digital payments. So there's a direct impact on GDP and hence on policies as well, economic policies as well. For real-time payments, I can say it brings the cost savings for the ecosystem as a whole. It's not just about banks and financial institutions, but cost savings for businesses, small and medium businesses, corporates, consumers. The per transaction cost reduces versus a traditional mode like an ACH or a bank transfer. It also brings down the cost associated with fraud and failed transaction, like failed direct debit or bounced checks, reversed bank transfer. So the proportion of transactions that fail is less in case of real-time payments. Also, I think the increased use of real-time payments will help monitor all transactions, and hence the shadow economy that goes on in parallel. So more you're able to monitor and track, the more conscious decisions you can take with regards to, monetary and economic policies. And I would also say that real-time payment speeds up the circulation of money in the market, in the economy as well, and the instant nature which directly impacts the liquidity position of any country. So we've seen a lot of, there's also the new concept of smart cities. Most of the major cities are moving towards a smart city concept that is helping the move to cashless payments and boost economy. So the benefit is for the ecosystem at large.
Thank you, Soumya. If you still have questions, because I see that there now are coming more questions also through the chat, please use the Q&A button on your screen. I will try to answer them in writing as we have to move to the second presentation of today. That one will be from Fernando Rodriguez Ferres from Bizum in Spain. Fernando, can you tell us some more about the experiences with instant payments in Spain, especially at Bizum, of course?
Hi, Willem. Yes, thank you for the invitation and having the chance to explain how we got so far with instant payments in Spain. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about the context. So, what brings us here? As you know, a few years ago in Europe, there was an evolution from Sepa, regular Sepa to Sepa Inst. So, in terms of different markets, they had different approach. In the case of Spain, there was a joint initiative among all the industry sector in order to deliver a value-added solution over instant payment. So it was like to say a corporate entrepreneurship. So all the banks decided to create a new company, and they decided to create a brand too. So to increase recognition and to enable the proxy to the account in order to improve the user experience for customers. And also everything happened within the banking channel. So later on, we will see different approaches in Europe, but everything happens within the banking channel. And this helped in order to get penetration among customers. This happened in 2016, as I was saying, and 5.5 years later, in 2022, what we are having is that more than 30 banks are offering Bizum, and we cover more virtually the 100% of the market share in Spain at the moment. And we had some context. Because Bizum is not the only solution in Spain that are fostering the ability to have the linkage of the phone number to the Iban. So we see different solutions in Europe. This is data from past November. So you see that in terms of the maturity of the country in terms of digitalization, that some solutions might be more successful than others. And also the approach. When you see Canal Bancario, it means that the service is embedded within the banking channel. And when you read Canal Propio, it means that there is a white label app or a standalone app that all the users have the chance to download and have the same user experience regardless the bank they have the account. So, and this is also a very interesting point because as you see, these kind of solutions work very well on a domestic level, because when you have to send money to a friend or to pay something, the majority of the cases it will be made on a domestic level. But we see the value of creating a pan-European solution as well. But of course, it would make more sense if we take that all the ground base that we have in Europe, maybe focusing on interoperability. We will talk about that later. And when we focus in Spain, we have some characteristics. I mean, this not might only apply to Spain, but we found that these four could be the key success factors for Bizum and for payments in Spain, right? First of all, the extensive use of cash. In Spain, there are a lot of people using cash on a daily basis, and Bizum helped a lot in order to get rid of cash. Also COVID helped in these past 2 years to people to reduce the use of cash. And legislation. In Spain, there's a legislation that passed a few months ago that it does not allow to pay more than 1,000 euros in cash, okay, for merchants or for services that you are contracting. Also, in terms of penetration of smartphones, I mean, in order for these solutions and the network effect to happen, all the users need to have the device. And in this sense, Spain is one of the leader countries in this sense. So most of the people in Spain have
cell phone, and you carry the cell phone with you all the time. It's not happening the same with cash or with your wallet. Maybe you forgot it at home, but the cell phone is something that you don't go to the street without one. And also the digital roadmap in banking. As you may know, after the 2008 crisis in Spain, there were a lot of office branches around Spain, and this is started to shrink. So banks decided to focus on having a remote channel and having the customers through their remote channels, and this helped to reduce the presence of offices around Spain. And as you also might understand, the competence from the competition from big techs, right? So banks are not alone anymore in this field. There are neobanks, there are big techs that are approaching the financial services with maybe not only payment services, but with services around the core services from financial banks, from financial sector. So this is also a key enabler, right, for banks in order to decide to launch Bizum 5 years ago. And now I'm going to talk about what we have done so far. So some figures in Bizum. So the value proposition that we launched to the market is very straightforward. I mean, there are five items. The first one is instant payments. As I was saying, this is key in order to foster STT-ins, the new standard in payments. And also it brings a new sense for the consumer in the sense that they can realize that they can acknowledge that the payment is done, and they can check their balance, and the payment is done within 5 seconds. So this also helps adoption. So you trust instant payments. This is also important for merchants because they have the payment warranty that they are going to receive the payment, and they have the funds. They're from the merchant right in the moment that it happens, the transaction. The registration is really easy because it happens within the banking app. You don't have to add any more information. You just sign the terms and conditions, and you can start using the service. Also, the user experience. Later on, we will have the chance to review the user experience for e-commerce and POS payments. But as I was saying, the registration is really easy. And then in order to make a Bizum, you just need to go to your banking app, select a phone from the agenda, and just trigger the payment, and the payee will get the notification right away. Since everything happened within the banking channel, this is a trust element for the consumers, because it happens within the banking channel, so they don't have to download a different app. So it could also add more complexity for the user in order to understand the service, if it belongs to the banks or not. And also the network effect is key for this. So all the banks, at the moment, all of the banks in Spain offer Bizum. So this is also key in order to foster adoption, and all users are ready to make a Bizum. And we happen to have reliable data from user. I mean, if I'm trying to send money to somebody, I'm going to check that the phone number belongs to that person, and there's no way that that you can have fake information in the system. So all the participants all the users in Bizum went through the Know Your Customer process. So all the data is reliable, and you can trust that the money is going to be received by the people that you are expecting. And we leverage the system in 4 pillars. So on top of everything, the users and the use cases, we will review that now, the trends and what are these use cases. And on the sites, we are having the back of the banks. So the model is based on the banking industry, as I said before, and we have a governance and working groups with the banks. So we are a small team in Bizum. We manage the brand, and everything happens also with the banks, which are the shareholders, and we talk to them in order to deliver new services, and we validate with them new ideas and new projects. On the right side, as I was saying, the product has a great user experience. It has a great customer satisfaction, and the value proposition, as I said before, is based on immediateness, security, and simplicity. And we are leveraged above all is the infrastructure, which is instant payments. In our case, the infrastructure is managed by RedSys, which is the largest payment processor here in Spain. We enable all the connections that they were already in place with banks, and we are leveraged, as I was saying, the standard for SCT. So the use cases in Bizum, so far we have 5 use cases. Everything is based on SCT-ins. The P2P was the first use case, and this helped us in order to launch new services because the customer base was growing and they were willing to make more payments with more use case, to have more use cases. So then we launched the donations to NGOs, which is going pretty good. I mean, more than 6,000 NGOs are enrolled today in Bizum. Then we launched e-commerce by the end of 2019. Later on, we will see some figures for e-commerce, but at the moment, more than 30 online merchants are already enrolled in Bizum. Then we launched the first face-to-face solution in Bizum. It was a tailor-made solution for the Spanish National Lottery Association. So it's an institutional actor in Spain that decided that they were willing to get rid of cash. So it enables also not only paying, but also collecting the prices directly into the account. And the last one is the enterprise. So we are also permitting companies in order to send money to consumers because of redemptions, promotions, anything, and also for consumers to pay the companies on a different channel than the virtual POS. So it's like the companies requesting money because of some debt collections or anything like that. And in terms of penetration, Bizum is leading the instant payments in Spain. More than 90% of the instant payments in Spain were channeled through Bizum, and also Spain is leading on the SCT level in Europe, representing close to 50% of all the SCT-ins from last year. In terms of users and trends, so this is the main figures of the customer base in Bizum. So more than 20 million so far. As you see the trends on operations, this is all the use cases, embracing all the use cases. So we expect this year to get more than 850 million transactions. So as you see, it's pretty it is growing pretty much. And in terms of users, you see the trends, how the users have been growing, and we expect more than 4 million users this year in Bizum. In the upper right side, you see the age profile in Bizum. So as you see, it's not only Bizum; it's present on the youngsters in the Spanish population, but it's very well spread. And in terms of penetration among age groups, you see that the largest penetration happens to be under 35 years old, and still we have some room to grow from 50 and above. And in terms of activity, there are great numbers because close to 80% of the users make at least one Bizum in March. So those are pretty good numbers. So the latest use cases that we've launched are the e-commerce. So this is the user experience on e-commerce. So basically, when I'm browsing on a website, I see Bizum as payment option. So I click on Bizum. The only thing I need to do is type my phone number in case that the merchant does not have the phone number already registered. That's also an option that the merchant send us through the phone number. Then what happens is that similar to auto-funds or cards, right? So I get a push notification in my banking app. I go to my banking app and I accept the payment. So it's pretty much straightforward. People are saying that these cuts can have the time to pay against other payment solutions that they have. So we got a great customer success, and also in terms of merchants. So this is also key. So this is a new level. So because in the P2P, the network effect is clear. I mean, if my surroundings, the people surrounding me are using Bizum, I can use it. But it's not the same on e-commerce. My colleague could be using Bizum to pay, but if the online merchant that I'm typically buy from, they don't have Bizum, I don't have the need to use it, right? So as you see, top merchants in Spain are already using Bizum, like Zara, Iberia, AliExpress, MediaMarkt, Decathlon, and the growth is also very good. We expect to have 25 million transactions this year, and to more than 100 million in 2 years. So it's growing. It depends on more factors than the P2P in order to get this growth, but I think we are in the good pace. And regarding some market studies, we don't have the visibility on other payment methods, but for example, a PSP published this a few weeks ago, saying that on the payments they process, Bizum is already the second option over PayPal, for example. Also, in terms of customer satisfaction, Bizum, we make some market studies. Bizum is the largest in terms of customer satisfaction, and then this is something that we did, but also the consumers organization in Spain also published their own publication, and as you see, Bizum also have the largest, the best global satisfaction compared to other solutions like Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, etc. So when we're talking about the user for POS, this is the first user experience that we develop in Bizum. So it is based on QR. So the first option is I go to my banking app, I generate a QR, and in case I want to pay something, the only thing I need to do is show the QR to the cashier, and then I accept the payment and everything's done. And in case I win a prize, I can do the same. I generate the QR, the same QR, and the scanner will read it, and everything happens straightforward. I don't need to do anything else. So I got the funds in my account in less than 5 seconds. So this is the first user experience, but the idea of the next challenges in Bizum are focus on e-commerce and payments to professional freelancers. So this is also things that we are focusing at the moment. The payment to freelancers is based on the same rails as e-commerce. The new projects is in-store payments based on QR, but also we are thinking about NFC. Also, the collection payments to companies is something that is technically available, but commercially it's going to be really soon. And then we are exploring other options, right? So like digital ID, this is high at the moment in Europe, since we have reliable data in our infrastructure. Why not leveraging that and enable the same user experience we have for the e-commerce payment to identify myself on any website or any application? New use cases like subscription. At the moment, Bizum, you need to be in front of the website of the application in order to confirm a payment. This is something that we are also working on. So we can just, after a valid SCA, strong customer authorization, we can trigger recurring payments on the following months. European interoperability, as I said earlier, there are different solutions in Europe. The Nordics are doing something regarding P27. There are also other initiatives that are pursuing this. So we are also open to explore this, maybe with bilateral agreements or joining different initiatives that might be happening in Europe, and offer the ability for our users to trigger a payment to another account. And the last one is integration with third parties. So why not having the chance or having the ability to launch a Bizum payment from a different application aside the banking. So this is all the next challenges for Bizum. So thanks for your attention. In case you have any doubt, please, I'm more than happy to reply.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Maybe one question to follow up. I mean, you have, of course, seen a very rapid growth in the number of users since you started 5 years ago. What have been main drivers, and also did the increasing brand recognition was that an important driver to your growth?
Yeah, I think the brand recognition is key for the consumers. Once they adopted Bizum on a daily basis, they also say "make a Bizum" is a popular phrase, so everybody uses it in the same way. So it's more like slang at the moment in terms of referring to payments. And also, I think COVID helped, because maybe some consumers that might not be interested in Bizum, but since they couldn't get money withdraw money from the ATM, so they paid attention to other solutions like Bizums, more digital. So once they tried, we gained the confidence of this type of consumers. This also helped a lot to spread the brand among different age groups, and this is something unstoppable. Once we got this, and the confidence in the brand is also a key matter for us.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for your presentation. Now we move to the third presentation from Lajos Barta of the Central Bank of Hungary. Lajos will share with us the experiences with instant payments in Hungary. Please, Lajos, go ahead.
Thank you. And I would like to speak about the Hungarian experience. And let's have a look at the past in Hungary. In Hungary, the first studies we published about the cost of payments was after 2010. And at that time, we have seen that in Hungary, the cash usage was very significant. Only around 10% of all transactions were made electronically. And therefore, the central bank has created a two-pillar strategy. The first pillar was to create the possibility in every use case to pay electronically. And the second pillar was that if it's possible, then we somehow have to promote the usage of electronic payments, because we have seen that even if there is a POS terminal in a retailer and the people has a card in its pocket, they don't pay electronically, they use the cash. And we have to explore why. We have seen that we have done a next snapshot around 2015, what kind of major trends we see in Europe and in Hungary. And we have seen in Hungary a nice growth of the payment card market. But also we have seen that there are many use cases when card is not appropriate. So we cannot pay huge transactions with card. There are a lot of payment situations where card is not appropriate. And of course, we have seen that the cash has a huge public cost. This came out of the cost of payment study. And of course, what we have also seen that the technology has changed dramatically in the last decade. And the digitalization of all kinds of industries also entered the industry of the payments. And we have seen to born new needs from the clients. They have seen that emails can be sent and exchanged even transatlantically in seconds. And of course, the question emerged, why cannot we pay in seconds? Why does it take 1, 2, 3 days? And with this, and the two major need from the clients were basically the need for the prompt real-time transaction and to be able to transact financially, not only in the normal banking hour, which is from 8 to 5, but during the weekend and during the night as well. And what we have seen that on these needs of the clients, not firstly the banking sector replied, but new players has emerged. And we have seen the newcomers in this market. They grow a lot in the last decade. And now we know them as big tech companies at the payment market. And they offer a lot of new services of the clients. In Hungary, if you look back, the credit transfers in 2010 could be made overnight. Then in 2012, we have introduced the intraday credit transfer possibility. And in 2015, we increased the speed of the intraday credit transfers with increasing the settlement cycles. And then the first step of the instant payment was made in 2020 when we introduced the basic service. We extended this service in 2020 in the third quarter, and now we are working on the so-called instant payment phase 3 project. With the instant payment, with the introduction of the instant payment scheme in Hungary, we wanted to give a few reply to the market trends we have seen on the market. For the demand for prompt services, we have introduced the real-time service, maximum 5-second execution time. For the demand of the constant availability, we have produced the 724. For the problem of the closed system, which are mainly the e-money systems, which emerged in the last decade, we introduced in the instant payment scheme open standards and the interoperability and the opportunity for innovation. In Hungary, we don't have a domestic card scheme. Therefore, the only electronic payment method is the card, which is owned and operated by the card companies Visa and MasterCard, and this is done abroad. And this has some risk from a sovereignty point of view. What we see in the European field, EPI is the European Payment Initiative, is somehow also tackling this issue. We also wanted to have a Hungarian solution with a local system and the local jurisdiction. But we have also seen in many countries that even though instant payment is introduced, the user reachability is low, and therefore we made it obligatory. And but to the question that the card doesn't fit to all payment situation, we can now say that the current Hungarian instant payment scheme is available in every payment situation. There is no payment situation, I cannot imagine anything where you cannot pay electronically now with the instant payment scheme. The Hungarian instant payment scheme, I think there are many features which are same with the other instant payment schemes, since this is continuously operating, instant clearing and settlement. There are additional services, secondary IDs, open standards. So these kind of issues are the same in the Hungary as other national systems. But we have 3 items which is maybe a bit different from the other countries. The first and maybe the most interesting is that in Hungary, it was not an option for the payment service providers to join to this instant scheme. It was mandatory by law. And therefore, currently, any payment in Hungary, a credit transfer, which is less than 10 million Hungarian forint and approximately 28,000 euro, is an instant payment. It's even not the user, neither the user nor the payment service provider can put this to another system. This has to go instantly. We have also regulated that the execution time of an instant payment is maximum 5 seconds. And since most of the instant payment scheme are working on a pre-funded basis from the liquidity side, we also introduced an additional automated credit line, which works during the night and weekend. So if a participant miscalculates the liquidity need for a long weekend, then there is an automated way. They don't have to do anything. We can pull in liquidity to the instant payment scheme from the central bank account, and then it can work smoothly. What do the numbers show? On the left-hand side upper graph, you can see that in the first year in Hungary, we have reached 35% in the instant payment scheme. So you have seen at the very beginning that in Europe, 7% of all credit transfers are made instantly. In Hungary, after the first year, it was 35%. So we have reached much earlier this quite high level than in other countries, and this is due to the fact that in Hungary it was mandatory. So any client in any bank or any payment service provider can use the instant payment scheme. And I would mention also that in Hungary, not only the banks are allowed to be participant in the instant payment scheme, but also the non-bank institutions. And we also have a few non-bank institutions in the Hungarian instant payment scheme. On the right-hand side, you see that 96% of all transactions in the instant payment scheme executed in 2 seconds. So from entering the system, it will be credited on the other side in 2 seconds. More than 1/3 of the transactions are initiated by the clients outside of the normal banking hours. So it shows that the payment behavior of the clients has changed. And we have seen a very big increase in the last year in the small value transactions. So under 20,000 forint, which is around 60 euro, there is an 18% increase year per year in the instant payment scheme. In the last 21 months, we had 275 million instant payments. And if you see the annual growth rate of the credit transfers, you see that after the introduction of the instant payment scheme in 2020, it has a nice increase in the numbers as well. So we see a much higher annual growth rate than previously. And we also introduced to the scheme the possibility to build QR code payment or request to pay payment service on the instant scheme. And currently 60% of the market is covered by the QR code payment and 75% in the request to pay payment. And we also have a few non-bank institutions in this service as well. So what we see from the numbers that the first 2 years of the instant payment in Hungary was quite successful. If we have a look at this graph, we try to put together numbers from the European Union, which is available publicly from the ECB and from other statistics sources. This chart shows that what is the ratio of payment card purchases to annual household consumption in the member states of the European Union. And from this picture, we see that there is a really significant opportunity in the instant payment in Europe. But we also see that there are some issues which we have to improve. One is the accessibility. We know that there are a lot of national instant payment scheme, and we have pan-European instant payment scheme, but still the accessibility of the users, of the clients, is quite low. So in Hungary, we have this trial. We try to make it quite extensively. Therefore, in Hungary, every client, any retailer, any corporate, any customer can use the instant payment scheme. So this is something which should be reached somehow at the European level as well. The other issue was already mentioned by other speakers as well, that for the cross-border usage of the instant payment, the international or at least the European interoperability must be ensured. And of course, we also promote the initiatives of the European Central Bank and the European Commission to somehow make this available by some regulation. And of course, we can speak principally about the potentials and the advantages of the instant payment, but if the market doesn't develop user-friendly services, then at the end the users will not use them. So therefore, we think that they have to be able to use these mobile apps, which can provide a very good user experience. And what is the plan in Hungary? Currently, in 2021, the electronic payments ratio is 24%, and we have a plan, or we targeted to reach 50% by 2030. And we think that there are two main drivers, two main channels which can bring a lot of electronic transactions from the big cash cake. And the first one is the card. The card is growing. The card is necessarily growing, and we see in the last 5 years always around the 20% growth in Hungary. But we also see that the growth rate is decreasing a bit, so we need a new service to foster further the widespread of the services, the electronic payments, and this is the instant payment. The Central Bank of Hungary and its subsidiary, the GIRO, which is the Hungarian ACH, established the robust basic instant payment scheme. And we have seen a lot of changes in the client's behavior. So they used to the new service, they like the instant payment, and of course they like the card payment as well. And now we are working on the so-called instant payment phase 3 project, which in the end can contribute to the further extension of the electronic payments in Hungary. And this phase 3 includes a few items. One is the development of the service level with a full coverage of QR code payments and request to pay payments. So we are going to introduce maybe a new regulation in Hungary, which says that every payment service mobile application has to read the QR codes and has to be able to reply request to pay messages from big retailers or from billing companies. The second item which we are working in the phase 3 is ensuring the full interoperability. In this, we will refine the current Hungarian QR code for the instant payment scheme, QR standard, which we introduced at the introduction. And we also would like to introduce a few new messages and a new guideline for the request to pay messages. The third item is that in Hungary, currently 28,000 euro is the threshold for the instant payment, and we will increase this threshold at least doubled or maybe more significantly. And with this, we can bring more and more transactions to the instant scheme. And the fourth issue in this phase 3 development is establishing rules for a common brand. And the common brand, we also established a common brand when we introduced the instant payment scheme, but now we would like to educate the people, educate the retailers, the corporates, because we see that although in the last 2 years they have already faced that there is this new payment method, this new payment mechanism, but they have not studied yet, or their payment service providers did not educate them well how to use this and how to use the advantages of the instant payment scheme and the different payment methods based on the instant payment scheme. And therefore, we are now preparing a rule book how to use this instant payment brand, what are the main rules. And if you go to a physical shop or if you go to an online shop, the client will see that here is the possibility to pay instantly, and they can use either the QR based instant or the request to pay instant or the NFC based instant payment, and then they will be able to pay instantly. And as a result of this, we hopefully will see useful and user-friendly mobile payment applications for every payment situation. And if this new instant payment ecosystem will be completed and the card payment business will developed according to the last year's development, then we are sure that we can reach this goal, which is the 50%. And this 50%, we think that we will be around somewhere at the European average level. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lajos. If you look back at all the experiences that you now have in Hungary, what would be the main lesson that you would like to share with your colleagues in other countries?
Maybe the most interesting issue was when we first told the banking sector that in Hungary, this will be obligatory. So it will be no option to get out of this system. And at the first moment, everybody was shocked by this, since everybody has seen that this is a huge investment cost. This is a huge development project, and they didn't see basically what will be the advantages of this. And therefore, we had to discuss very deeply with them what are the potential advantages of the instant payment scheme. And I was really positively surprised, but the whole banking sector and those who are not banks in the system were really supportive during the project, and we could finish it in less than 3 years. So from the first day of the project, it was less than 3 years. So it is a difficult issue, but if it's well organized, you can do it you can do a complete instant payment for a whole country.
Thank you very much, Lajos. If you have a question still for Lajos, please use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to have the questions answered in writing. And now we move to a very short video of around 90 seconds, and then we'll start the second panel of today. So let's discuss the challenges and solutions for instant payments. For that, we have an excellent panel of policy experts, but also from the different market parties. They will first address to you some initial remarks, and then there is a possibility to ask some questions. For that, again, you can use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will start with Steve Reimer from DG FISMA. We will go a bit deeper into the instant payments proposal that he and his colleagues are preparing. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Willem. I hope everybody can hear me and see me. So I'm going to speak for a few minutes now without a PowerPoint. So just to run you through the economic background to the IP initiative that we're working on, the political background a little bit, and also what I can say at this point in time about the initiative itself. So I'm sure you will understand that the details are a little bit under wraps at the moment. And as a first preliminary remark, when I talk about IPs in this particular presentation, I'm talking about IPs in euro. So just to make that clear, so I don't have to say it every time. So just to run through the economic background, the SCT-in scheme of the EPC basically launched in 2017. So that's the time scale that we have been working with. Since then, there has been significant progress. We've got to the point now where basically 2 out of 3 payment service providers in the EU are in a position to offer IPs to their customers, i.e. they are members of SCT-Inst, and they have the necessary access to the necessary infrastructure. That doesn't necessarily mean that they offer IPs to all of their customers. I have this experience personally. I have 2 banks in Belgium, which I know for a fact are members of SCT Inst, but they don't offer me the opportunity to send IPs through my banking interface, so I can receive IPs. So there's progress that needs to be made there. With regard to the uptake of IPs, defined as a percentage of all credit transfers, the most recent data we have from November last year is 11%. So at the beginning, the figure of 7% was quoted, I think slightly earlier date. So it is creeping up, but the progress is slow, both in terms of the new PSPs joining the system and the overall uptake. And most importantly, and I think this is clear also in the ACI report, in Europe, we really do have a very much patchwork. There are some member states where the uptake of IPs is much higher than this EU average of 11%. And Spain is an example. We heard from Bism earlier. Estonia is another example. I think Estonia is the only EU member state where the uptake is well over 50%. We have other member states where really, even in the euro area, where IPs are pretty much non-existent, and the uptake is very, very close to zero. Really a fraction of a percent. I mean, I won't name them, but there are some euro area member states in that situation, and there are others where IPs are widely available, but they are priced as a premium service compared to the regular credit transfer. I mean, it can be 1, 2, 3 more euros for sending an IP. So clearly, you would only do that when it's a really emergency situation in those member states. So really, very much a patchwork situation in the EU. Now, we have identified 4 factors which are really essentially the drivers of this relatively low uptake for the IPs. The first one is the supply side driver, the fact that 1 in 3 PSPs in the EU does not offer the IPs, and this is really linked to network externalities. You want to know, at least, if you're going to offer your customers the service of sending IPs, that all the other payment service providers can receive IPs, which is not the case. So that many IPs can fail because the PSP of the beneficiary can't receive them. So there's a kind of spiral there linked to the network effects of payment systems. Now, on the demand side, one of the drivers of the low take-up is this premium pricing factor. I mean, it's as I say, in some member states, the main driver on the demand side is simply unavailability on the supply side. Where there is availability on the supply side, the premium pricing can deter the use of IPs by consumers. So the third factor that we have identified behind the low take-up is security concerns. This could be about fraudulent payments or misdirected payments. And there is this idea that with a classic credit transfer, if you realize in the seconds or minutes after making or after sending a payment order that there seems to be something wrong with the payment, you still have a chance to catch up. It's not legally guaranteed, but PSPs are obliged to make best efforts to recover a payment order. And sometimes if it is still in the paying institution, it can be saved. But that is not the case, of course, with IPs, which go through within seconds. So there is some concern on the consumer side about security there. And the final factor that we have identified concerns actually sanctions screening, because very often when there is transaction-based screening of payments against sanctions lists, there is a red flag that appears. And actually, in the vast majority of cases, it's a false red flag. It's somebody with a similar name to somebody on a sanctions list, etc. In the case of a regular credit transfer, that can be sorted out. It can maybe slow it down by a few minutes or an hour or two. But in the case of an instant transfer, an IP, there is no time for that. So the red flag just means that the payment is killed. It's failed. And this is a serious problem. So those are the four drivers of low take-up that we identified. And on the economic benefits, I don't want to kind of bombard you with numbers, but one key number that I do want to put out there is that we have calculated that at any given moment in time, there is an amount of up to 187 billion euros in transit in payment systems for traditional credit transfers. Also, we include check payments in there. So this is a huge amount. So any increase in the uptake of IPs will bring down that amount, which we call the float. And even if we don't get it down to zero with 100% uptake of IPs replacing traditional credit transfers completely, there is potential to release billions of euros. And of course, this is not new monetary creation. That money exists, but it's currently in transit accounts of banks. If it was in the accounts of the payees, whether they are individual consumers or companies, that money would be available for consumption or investment, which is a more beneficial use than simply being trapped in the transit account of banks. The way I think about it is, it's like if you fill your car with petrol, but you always have like some of the petrol tank full. You never go down to zero. You have unused petrol there. It's the same in the payment system. So another very important benefit of greater uptake of IPs would be that it would trigger innovation. Now, we heard this a little bit earlier from ACI, and one of the key areas where we think innovation could be triggered is new payment systems for point of interaction with retailers. They could be QR based, they could be based on existing cards or new types of cards or other kind of support. But at the moment, we don't really have that critical mass of IPs there to stimulate this innovation in new POI solutions. And we hear very often from fintechs that they would like to work on this, but the critical mass isn't there. So we think that would be a second very important benefit of greater uptake. So these benefits would be spread around among many different categories of stakeholders. Obviously, the individual consumers getting their money quickly in P2P payments, of course. Small businesses, SMEs, we're going to hear their point of view soon. But of course, this can help improve cash flow. Though, of course, the basic problem of late payments to SMEs is that the payment is initiated late by the debtor. But if we can compress the transit time for the payment, that can at least help a little bit. And of course, for retailers, receiving the money more quickly via an IP would potentially be beneficial compared with getting a card payment. It has a payment guarantee, but that's paid for. So we think that cheaper payments for retailers could be one of the results of this. So many also public administrations. I should mention public administrations such as tax authorities collecting the money more quickly also. So many potential stakeholders could benefit there. So that's a bit on the economic background. On the political background, I will be more brief. Just a reminder that the Commission put out its retail payment strategy in September 2020, and various things there. But one of the key things was the IPs, and we committed to look at that in great detail. And after that, we had conclusions from the member states and the Council expressing great support for this. The Commission put in its work program for this year, 2022, that it would produce an initiative on instant payments, but it did not at that time say whether it would be legislative or not. But then in the next step, Commissioner McGuinness in a speech on the 9th of February, actually put out there for the first time that we will work on a legislative initiative. So that's what we're doing right now. There's a impact assessment that we're working on, and there's a legal text that we're working on. And so our planned timing for this initiative, third quarter of this year, probably towards the end of the third quarter, so September, I think is realistic. We have a number of phases we have to go through, translation, etc. And the form in which we are thinking of putting this initiative would be an amendment of the Sepa regulation. Sepa regulation, of course, 2012 covers credit transfers, of course, including IPs and direct debits. But the IPs did not exist at that time. So it needs to be adapted to bring IPs more specifically within the framework. Now, I'm sure everybody would like to know the details of what we're going to propose, but of course, we have internal procedures. It's under wraps until it's finalized. But I can just give you some hints about what we're going to look at in the proposal. So basically, we have 4 pillars which correspond to the 4 factors, the 4 drivers that I mentioned before, which are behind the relatively low uptake of IPs in the EU. Number 1, the supply side by PSPs. And there, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that we are examining the possibility of some sort of obligation on PSPs. We heard in Hungary, there is an obligation on PSPs to take part in the national system. So we are looking at some form of obligation, though we have to see what the details would be, timing, etc. On the pricing, that was the second driver. Yes, we are looking at some rules on pricing. It would not be the first time that we intervened on pricing in the area of payments. Of course, we have the famous cross-border regulation, which equalizes the pricing of domestic and cross-border payments within the Eurozone. So it would not be the first time. We are looking at that, but there are various possible formulas, various possible ways in which you can direct the pricing. So we can't say which particular format or model will be adopted in the end. Third driver was the security concerns. On the security side, we are looking at various initiatives which exist both inside and outside the EU. On security, one thing which many people are looking at the moment is Iban and name checking services, which alert a payer before the finalization of a payment order to any possible discrepancy in the between the name and the bank account entered. Of course, at the moment, of course, the IBAN is the unique identifier that drives the payment. The name is actually not a significant driver. But we're looking at those initiatives, but there are issues there around liability, around data protection that we have to look at also before seeing what we propose in the end. And finally, on the sanctions screening, we are looking at ways to try to eliminate the very, very high rate of false hits, which can lead to the failure of instant payments. But there, the absolute #1 priority is not to negatively impact in any way the efficiency of sanctions screening. And of course, sanctions are very, very, very high in the news at the moment with various sanctions packages, which the EU has announced. So it is, we would not propose anything if there was the slightest risk that it could negatively impact the efficiency of sanctions controls. So we have to kind of find a double solution there to really reduce the level of false hits without reducing the efficiency. So that's basically what I can say about what we are looking at. I regret that I can't go into a great level of detail, but if you watch this space, we very much hope that a proposal will be ready by September, and then you will see what the details are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. And if you have a question for Steve, please use the Q&A, and most probably will come back after we have had all the initial interventions. For that, we now move to Martina Weimar of the European Payments Initiative. Martina, could you tell us some more about what you are doing basically to increase the uptake of instant payments in the EU?
Yes, thank you, Willem. Yeah, thank you. So yes, EPI is trying to come up with a European or European-enabled solution for instant payment. And yeah, with everything that has been said already, I think what is clear is that we can benefit from an important learning curve of all the national solutions already, and also about all the studies and the hurdles, the challenges that are existing. So the idea we came up was to say, well, we need to introduce instant payment progressively. We need to get the usage up and running. And of course, the supply side is important and needs to be there. That's why it is important to see that we have 13 very big banks involved in 2 acquirers. That is the basis. This is important because if you think about, for example, the weight of the German and French market in Europe together, then you have already about 45% of the current transaction numbers, excluding cash. So we are focusing for the time being on France, Germany, and Belgium, with some corporations with other markets under discussion. And the idea is to cover all use cases. First, to start with P2P and P2Pro. So the professional payments, so for individuals who provide services to have the possibility to pay them immediately. But then also to move into E&M commerce very quickly, because we see a real need there. And then finally to move into plain vanilla POS payments. The idea, nevertheless, from the very beginning is, and I think that is absolutely essential for any payment solution, independently of instant payment or not, to bring additional value to the market, meaning to the consumer and to the merchants. And of course, when you look at all the solutions that exist already, the question is, what can you really come up with which would be differentiating? So the conclusion we came to is, well, the P2P more European factor not being limited just to the national ground might be important, but more importantly is to offer new use cases. So situations where a card or other solutions are not sufficient. What I mean is, well, the P2Pro is largely underdeveloped in Europe. First use case, which is interesting to explore, if I pay my sport coach and I get an electronic receipt of this, I even can ask for an invoice, that's attractive in a one-click operation. The other very attractive use case is what we could qualify as scan and go. So to scan a QR code and walk out of the shop. So I pay basically in an e-commerce mode while I'm in a shop or in the street. That allows to circumvent the whole going through the cash register process and allows the merchant to offer new channels to sell to the customer. It's very attractive because it allows to get away all of this terminal business and to do the queuing there. So I think that is something which is highly important, and we see it. And also new use cases like, for example, managing subscription in an app and through instant payment, and not having to renew regularly your card details to update them and so on. So there are many variations, I would say, where instant payment come across as something very attractive to replace cash or usual transfers, more cumbersome, through something that goes through a smartphone wallet app and allows you to handle these new use cases, but something which also covers the current use cases, because the consumer is looking for something not fragmented, but harmonized, able to be used in all situations. So that is really what we are focusing on. And to come back to some of the hurdles or challenges that were mentioned about security, yes, we think it's super important. And that's why we work together on this with the banks. So it's the security of your own banks that comes with this, but that's not enough. We need to bring much better consumer protection. And so we worked out on an additional layer of consumer protection and merchant dispute handling. And I would say most importantly, we made the effort to develop a specific rule book, so a scheme rule book for instant payment in commerce, because otherwise you will always have the hurdle that the rules are not established consistently. So what about refund, recharging, deferred payments, the liabilities, and so on? So we defined that in the perspective really to make instant payment commerce ready. And that was our big focus. And we think that if you see it out of the merchant perspective, it is absolutely necessary to come with a broader scope than that's just the national boundaries, because the European merchants who very often operate in various countries, they want to have one integration. They don't want to have an integration per market. They want something that works all over Europe and can be accepted all over. So we are really trying to make it convenient and adequate for the various markets, but most importantly, working with the merchants, understanding where their needs are, because we are absolutely convinced that we need to bring together both sides, so the consumer and the merchant. And the nice way how to do it, and we have seen it from all the national solutions which did already so much for the launch of instant payment, starting by P2P, P2Pro, getting then into E&M commerce, and then addressing also POS, but from the beginning, being able to accept new situations like the scanning of a QR code and finalizing a transaction just in your app without using a cash register or a terminal. So that is in a nutshell what we do. And last but not least, to complete what was said about the security, we also come up with a new fraud prevention solution shared among the various participating markets, because we are fully aware that if we do not pay very much attention to the fraud level, this could be another hurdle for the development of instant payment. So that's why we believe that a joint and a broad fraud prevention solution for Europe is also a guarantee for the future success of instant payment.
Thank you very much, Martina. Also, if you have questions for Martina, I saw already some things coming into the Q&A. So please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Now we move to Hans Littlejohn of EBA Clearing. Hans, Hayes, how do you see the supply and demand aspects playing a role in the development of instant payments?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, for those who don't know EBA Clearing, just a quick intro. We're founded in 1998 by 70 or so European banks to promote efficient pan-European payment infrastructure in the collaborative space, country neutral, and a non-for-profit basis. And we're operating, processing today SCT payments, high-value payments, around 17.5 billion per year. And in the real-time instant payments, which we launched in 2017, we are now processing 430 million per year, or approximately 2 million per day. And that is a 100% above what it was in 2020. So the growth rate is actually pretty fast. We have 80 participants across 25 countries. So that's a little more than Sonia was presenting, but it actually is quite good. And we have complete pan-European reach of all the adhered participants. We're 100% European owned, European governed, and European regulated. So I think those are important parts about who we are. As to SCT, I noticed in the program, SCT instead, only 7% are instant, and we recognize that that's closer to 11 or 12% now. That's good. I also noticed in Sonia's presentation that despite 14 years of being live in the UK, only 9% of all transactions are instant or faster. So I think one of the questions I have and things, do we have the right metric? Is 11% of SCT the right metric, or should we be looking at 11% of all payments? Because as some of the people already mentioned, A lot of what we're talking about here is e-commerce and point of sale as the real drivers, and these things are only enabled by solutions. And I think that's an important point. And cards and cash actually provide those solutions today. So the alternative is not really SCT. It's actually cards and cash that we should be looking at when we're looking at an appropriate metric. The remaining PSPs, if the legislation comes and is implemented, I assume it will be, then the remaining PSPs in Europe, the 30% or so by BIC, will be added. And I think that's part of the story. I think it's half the story, in fact. But even before that, 75% of European accounts could be reached by RT1 and TIPS, and now this is around 80%. And with the legislation, of course, this will rise, but that is only half the story. And the question I think Martina also raises, and the points she makes, are really good ones. What about the demand side? In product and services, this is where the uptake usually is the slowest. In our 20-year experience managing infrastructures, operating infrastructures, payment infrastructures, we see the infrastructure usually goes about 5 years ahead of the products. And I think that's important to recognize, that we need to be sure that has the time to develop. So, I mean, I think there's an implicit assumption that everything has to be now and instant, and it has to be right now. And I'm not sure whether that's the right thing. So I think the case has to be compelling end to end, whether the payments can be better, faster, cheaper. And I think this relies on solutions. And I think in addition to thinking about mandating access and connectivity to instant payment systems, I think it would be very helpful if the lawmakers would also be looking at the solution side and how to stimulate this. So I think maybe a better question in this whole thing is, what's a better target share of instant and why? And need everything be instant? In SCT today, a lot of what's there is bill payment, recurring invoices, one-off payments, and these go very fast over SCT. With planned improvements in step 2 to this year, this will be reduced down to about 30 minutes or so. So a lot of that liquidity that is theoretically blocked in the system will also be removed through this bit. And I think another point is that this concept of new normal of instant payments is catchy and very directional, but it does need context. Normal is a statistical function, it's a distribution. And a normal may count for majority, but not all, and this will change over time. We still have checks in Europe. I think it's important, Carl also mentioned the euro that in the introduction, that online and POS are the most important uses of instant payments. And I think this is important. This is why I say we need the killer apps to allow this to happen. EPI will certainly be one of them. I think it's also important that request to pay could also be something that would stimulate growth on the commercial side and drive up volume significantly, as well as user experience. And there are a number of niches out there. And I think if these things could be supported by policymakers and lawmakers, it would also go a long way to improving the adoption. So I'll leave it there for now, Peter. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hayes, and we'll come back in the discussion to you. I expect that also will be some questions on your intervention, which also, of course, reflected on the previous interventions related to supply and demand of instant payments. But now first we move to Gerard Hummer. Gerard is representing SME United, and of course looking at what the impact could be both on the positive side and the negative side for SMEs. Please, Gerard. You're muted.
So now do you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the invitation to represent the payment users today in this event. And good morning to everybody. We in SME United, we are representing mainly really micro enterprises. So the average member of our member organization at national level has 4 employees. Therefore, we are looking on the payment side very much in the de facto the B2C business and from the merchant point of view, and not that much in B2B payment systems, but I will also make a short comment on this side. When it comes to instant payment for SMEs, of course, we are very much in favor of these new developments, and in principle, average SME will benefit from a better rollout of instant payment and the possibilities, as Steve has mentioned in his presentation. For us, of course, it can be, or it is already a simple solution when SMEs want to sell online. It can increase the cash flow when the money comes earlier, faster in. It can reduce late payment, and if you get instant payment indirectly when you sell something, you get immediately the money, then the late payment becomes a less dominant problem. Another point is this is P2P. It allows SMEs which have a little bit less creditworthiness. If you pay directly to your supplier instantly, then you may get a delivery which otherwise say, no, I don't trust you enough to send you the stuff before I have the money on my account. On the more concerned side, when we discussed with our members as regards instant payment, of course, is what are the costs involved to changing to accepting instant payments, to deal with instant payments. It's about are there increasing costs if you cannot do bulk payments, if you have to do in your bookkeeping, you have for each payment a different line. And on the counter side to the late payment story, there are concerns that large enterprises will ask smallers to do instant payments, while of course the large companies which SME supplying to still will not pay immediately, but will insist on long-term terms. So here there are the concerns. However, on the question of investments, the reality on the SME side, especially on the micro enterprise side, is the restaurants, the bars, the whatever you take, the small merchants. The reality is that they are not investing as such in payment systems. So they get offers from their acquirer service provider, which is mainly the house bank, and what they are offering them when they say this is for PSO or for your online solution, this will offer you, this is the method you can use. So if there are offers which are attractive enough for a merchant, they will take it, but they will not do it on their own and search on their own. The big question, and this is the reason why we are also in favor of looking much forward to the Commission proposal, is how to solve the cross-border payments. Even many of SMEs are not cross-border active when they in the merchant role, but especially in countries, for example, where you have tourism, they want to have the possibility then to also to accept instant payments from their foreign clients. The problem with the R payment has to be solved is a part of the consumer protection story. But the main issue for SMEs will be, is there a cheaper offer compared to existing payment services? So when you say instant payment, account-to-account payments are less cost-intensive than the traditional card payments, or the payment schemes are provided by Google or Apple, etc., etc. And SMEs are very often complaining about the high costs they have to pay for the acquirers. If there are offers which makes them cheaper for merchants, then of course the demand side will increase immediately on this side when the offers are there. And the same question is, what are the incentives for the payer, for the consumer, or for our clients to use instant payment instead of a credit card, especially when we are in a situation where let's say the impression or of the consumers when they use a credit card, that they say that's for free, they get some bonuses, and they only have to pay a couple of weeks later than they have used the service or bought some products. Therefore, the rollout from a merchant point of view will happen if there are business models become available which are more attractive also from the pricing side than the existing models. And if this works, if it is POS, if this only scanning, I think the most innovative solution would be the best one. But I think, and this is to come to an end, it's a pity that we have now the Spanish model, we have a Hungarian model, we have in Belgium something, we have in other countries, Denmark something, in Sweden something, in Netherlands something, but that we not started from the beginning to come with a European solution when the European instant payment scheme was introduced by EPC. It is, of course, a little bit of disappointment, and we could have done it better, but now we are in this situation and we will suffer a lot, like we have suffered with the Sepa introduction. We will suffer a lot to get interoperability between the different systems, because they are, many of them, going really in opposite directions as regards the pooling or push systems, etc. With the QR codes, they are working a different way. So here will be a big challenge to make them interoperable, and but we have to do it when we want to make instant payment a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A screen. Maybe to start with, Hayes, you mentioned in your presentation that the new legislation should also very much ensure that there will be new solutions. Do you have some further deliberations on what that could entail?
Yeah, sure, Peter. I think it's down to the point that the supply side is 80% there, and that's half the problem. So the infrastructure will be in place, and acceptance is great. But unless there's a convincing solution, and I differentiate between a payment solution and a payment system. A payment system processes and settles transfers. The solutions is what the end user sees. So the small the merchants or the individual users. And I think those are the things where we need to put focus to get uptake and to provide alternatives to cards and cash displacement, which have been mentioned as the main drivers. And so, things that could be helpful there would be to promote the use of QR code-based solutions across Europe, not just locally. But also the SRTP, the request to pay. The scheme is in place, and there's a problem that a lot of the merchants, a lot of the PSPs have with it, is nobody wants to be first to launch into it, and you need a certain amount of critical mass there. And so some encouragement there would also be very helpful, because on top of those two things, innovation can occur. It can occur at PSP level, at Payment Institute level, anywhere. And that's the thing that will make, I think, the huge difference in uptake, and not only the availability of infrastructure. So you need to focus on both.
Thank you, Hayes. Maybe you want to also say something about the constant availability of the receiver, say, for instance, the retail treasurers. We had also a question on that. What about the availability, 24/7 availability of retailers receiving millions of euros during the weekend? This requires their treasuries to be always open.
Yeah, that was a question from
Malakote.
Yeah, from Pete. Yeah, I agree with him. If you're asking me, I agree with him, because if there's a large asymmetry between the senders and the receivers, you could end up with a lot of liquidity sitting in places where it gets trapped again. Especially on weekends, if treasurers aren't there to move the funds back along, or they don't open their own payments 24/7. So, the related cost of moving this through the entire ecosystem is pretty high. Making a change at the center, like in RT1 or TIPS, or even in local payment systems, is relatively small compared to the rippling out that has to happen in the change in small users across the ecosystem. And I think that can't be underestimated. But I think the point about liquidity is a good one. So if somebody is not in and they receive 10, 20, 30 million in instant payments on Saturday, and they have no mechanism to push it back out, then it'll sit there until they're back. It's important.
Thank you, Hayes. Martina, I think you have already thought about this as EPI.
Yes, because we did a lot of research with the merchants, and one of the aspects that they were requesting is flexibility in receiving the funds. Also because they don't want to receive individual transactions. So we have to make sure that we offer a system which is fully flexible, meaning they can receive it transaction by transaction, they can receive it several times a day in a bundled way, or batch even just in the next day. It depends on what the receiving party, so the retailer or the professional, want. So, and yeah, we cater for this in our rule book so that this becomes a standard for the introduction into the commerce or this professional space.
Thank you, Martina. And then I have also another question for you. Of course, in your initial intervention, you mentioned the importance of standardization, that it can be used also across Europe. We have also seen, of course, the previous hour that there are already many initiatives, some also very successful in certain member states. Have you already considered how to potentially connect or create that standard also with those existing initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, we at the beginning when we started to look at it, and indeed at the quite fragmented European market, of course, the question is, how do you really think that you can make instant payments big? And our conclusion is that we don't believe in interoperability. What I mean is, at the end, if you look at any big payment system, again, independently of instant payment, it is one system and not 50 shades of instant payments, right? So that doesn't work because it's not just technical, because technically you can maybe cater for this. It's the rules, it's the business model, it's the use cases, the functioning. It will create more confusion. And especially, well, how do you solve the merchant acceptability? The merchants want one unified integration once and not in every single market. So honestly, I think interoperability is a nice idea because I can understand the national solutions that they invested time and effort in developing. But at the end, I find it very, not realistic to believe that this becomes very big then. And there is an initiative who does this. It is EMSA. So fine, I think we will see different developments in Europe. EMSA is trying to do it since 2 years. Well, we will see whether it will work. We don't believe in it because what we know from the payment markets is you need to be unified and very much harmonized, aligned. Let's not forget is nobody is waiting per se for instant payments. We have to make it competitive. We have to position and be innovative, not just, oh, we want to safeguard whatever we have done so far. And that's, I think, the difference. But yeah, we will see. Nobody has a crystal ball. From our perspective, interoperability does not make sense, can be a solution for migration, but will not be successful at the end. If you look at all the solution, at the end, it's one functioning. You don't argue, for example, with Apple Pay on, oh, should it be 5 clicks or should it be 7 clicks? Or no, it's 2 clicks because it's Apple.
Okay, thank you very much, Martina, for the clear statement on interoperability. Steve, may I ask your views on this topic?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the thing is, we have to be very careful at the EU level not to kind of distort competition. I think there can be different initiatives coexisting. If you actually look at the text of the existing Sepa regulation, it doesn't actually talk about SCT, for example. It talks about the criteria for EU-wide payment systems. So I think it's very important for us to set the criteria at EU level, but we must be very careful not to kind of favor this initiative or that initiative. There are different initiatives which can exist, and there is this broad debate between interoperability of national systems and EU level solutions. I mean, I think we have an existing EU level scheme. I don't think there's any need for a new EU level scheme, but based on that scheme, as Hayes said, different payment solutions can exist. You can have You could have, for example, QR code-based solutions and card-based solutions. You could have new brands of card or existing brands of card which are moving to instant. So the actual payment solution at POI is a second phase. And so I don't think we really want to go down the path of micro-regulating what should be the POI solutions. Though what we certainly will do is a suitable time after the new legislation kicks in, review it and see if any kind of complementing is needed. But I think we have to get the basics in place first.
Thank you, Steve. Then we also received a few additional questions for you. Primarily also a question how this initiative will relate to other payments initiatives like the PSD2. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing is we have some initiatives in the payment area which are directly applicable regulations. We have the Sepa regulation, we have the regulation on cross-border pricing. We have PSD, which is of course a directive, which is transposed by national legislation. And here I would just want to flag that very, very soon, and I think within days, we are going to publish a public consultation as part of the PSD2 evaluation. So please, everybody, watch out for that and be willing to put in your views there. But I think the issues that are dealt with are largely not overlapping. I don't want to say that they're 100% not overlapping. I can see there is, for example, an article in PSD2 about liability in case of failed payments. There could be something there that we need to clarify in the case of IPs, failed IPs. Where does the liability lie? So I think there may be one or two very, very, very specific areas where there is an interaction with PSD2 that we need to look at. But broadly speaking, I think these are separate initiatives without too much overlap. Though of course, PSD2 continues to apply to instant payments in terms of the various consumer rights, etc. It continues to apply, but the PSD2 review is moving at a different timescale to the IP one. So we plan to do a report towards the end of this year, legislative proposal, if that's necessary, slightly after that, early next year. So there's full time for the PSD2 work to take into account what we're doing on the IP side.
Thank you very much, Steve. And with this intervention, we basically came to the end of our 2-hour webinar on instant payments. I would like to thank very much Steve, Martina, Hayes, Gerhard, but also Soumya, Fernando, and Lagos, who presented in the first hour of the webinar this morning. And we will be summarizing today's debate in an event report, which you will receive in the upcoming weeks, together, hopefully also with the presentations that were made during the first hours. If you want to stay up to date about the latest events and publications of ECRI, please subscribe to our newsletter at ecri.eu. And I hope to welcome you again next time. Thank you very much for now and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.